Bitter Romanian wind cut through Agent Maya Chen's tactical gear like shards of ice as she crouched behind the crumbling stone wall of the abandoned monastery. Her breath formed ghostly clouds in the sub-zero air, each exhale a potential death sentence that could give away her position to the heavily armed patrols circling the compound below. She had been tracking the arms dealer Viktor Kozlov for 3 months across 4 countries, following a trail of blood money and stolen weapons that led directly to this forsaken place nestled in the Carpathian Mountains. Maya's earpiece crackled, with static before her handler's voice broke through the interference. "Phoenix, this is Control. Thermal imaging shows at least 20 hostiles in the main building. Kozlov's transport helicopter landed 15 minutes ago. Window of opportunity is closing fast." She pressed her finger to the comm device, her voice barely a whisper against the howling wind. "Copy that, Control. Beginning infiltration now." But, as Maya prepared to rappel down the monastery's outer wall, something felt wrong. The guard's movements seemed too coordinated, too purposeful. Her instincts, honed by 12 years of covert operations, screamed danger. She had learned to trust that inner voice during her time in the CIA's Special Activities Division, and it had never failed her before. Yet the intelligence was solid. Kozlov was here with a shipment of military-grade weapons destined for a terrorist cell in Syria. This was her chance to cut off the supply chain and save countless innocent lives. As she secured her rappelling line to an ancient gargoyle, Maya's mind wandered briefly to her sister Emma, a nurse working in refugee camps along the Syrian border. Emma's last letter had been filled with heartbreaking stories of children caught in the crossfire, families torn apart by violence fueled by weapons like those Kozlov trafficked. This mission wasn't just about duty, it was personal. The descent down the monastery's weathered stone face was treacherous. Centuries-old mortar crumbled beneath her boots, sending small avalanches of debris into the darkness below. Maya's muscles burned as she controlled her descent, her tactical gloves struggling to maintain grip on the frozen rope. Halfway down, a loose stone shifted under her weight, and she held her breath as it tumbled into the void, the sound echoing off the canyon walls like a gunshot in the silence. She froze, pressed against the cold stone, counting her heartbeats. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. No alarms, no shouts. The guards below continued their patrol patterns, their flashlight beams sweeping predictable arcs through the courtyard. Maya allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps her luck would hold after all. Reaching the ground level, she found herself in a forgotten garden, where gnarled fruit trees stood like skeletal sentinels in the moonlight. Snow covered everything, in a pristine blanket that would clearly show her footprints, so she stuck to the shadows cast by the ancient walls, moving with the fluid grace of a predator stalking its prey. Her target was the main hall where thermal satellites had detected the largest concentration of heat signatures. The monastery's architecture worked in her favor. Numerous alcoves, hidden passages, and crumbling sections provided perfect cover. Maya had studied the building's blueprints for weeks, memorizing every corridor and secret chamber that might serve as an escape route. What she hadn't anticipated was how the place would affect her emotionally. There was something deeply unsettling about infiltrating what had once been a sacred space, now corrupted by the presence of arms dealers and killers. As she approached a side entrance, Maya noticed something that made her blood run cold. The door's lock was brand new, completely out of place on the medieval structure. More concerning were the fresh tire tracks in the snow leading to multiple vehicles hidden beneath camouflage netting. This wasn't just Kozlov's operation. It was something much bigger. She activated her night vision goggles and peered through a grimy window into the main hall. What she saw defied all her intelligence briefings. Instead of crates of weapons, the space was filled with sophisticated computer equipment, satellite communication arrays, and what appeared to be a high-tech command center. Men and women in expensive suits rather than military gear moved between workstations, their fingers flying across keyboards as data streamed across multiple monitors. Maya's heart sank as the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. This wasn't an arms deal, it was a trap, and she had walked directly into it like a lamb to slaughter. The question wasn't whether they knew she was here, but how long they had been expecting her arrival. Her worst fears were confirmed when a familiar voice spoke from the shadows behind her. "Hello, Maya. We've been waiting for you." She spun around to find herself face to face with Director Harrison Webb, her own CIA superior, flanked by 6 armed operatives. His weathered face showed no emotion as he regarded her with cold, calculating eyes. "I'm sorry it had to end this way, but you've become a liability to national security." The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. Webb had been her mentor, the man who had recruited her from MIT's computer science program and shaped her into one of the agency's most effective operatives. She had trusted him with her life countless times, and he had just handed her over to the enemy, like a piece in a chess game she didn't even know she was playing. "Why?" was all she could manage, her voice barely audible above the wind whistling through the broken stones. Webb's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because sometimes the greater good requires sacrificing the individual. You discovered something you weren't supposed to, Maya, something that could compromise operations spanning decades." He gestured to the operatives, and they began to close in. "You should have left well enough alone when you stumbled across those financial records in Prague." Maya's mind raced back to 3 weeks ago when she had been investigating a seemingly unrelated money laundering scheme. She had uncovered a series of transactions linking high-ranking government officials to various criminal organizations, but Webb had ordered her to abandon the investigation, claiming it was outside her jurisdiction. Now she understood why. He was protecting himself and others involved in the conspiracy. As the operatives raised their weapons, Maya felt a strange calm wash over her. She had always known this day might come. In their line of work, death was an occupational hazard, and betrayal by trusted allies was an all-too-common cause. But she wasn't ready to die, not when Emma was counting on her to stop weapons from reaching Syria. Not when there were still innocents she could save. "You made one mistake, Webb," she said, her voice gaining strength as her training kicked in. "You assumed I came here alone." The director's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Maya smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. 3 months ago, when I started tracking Kozlov, I reached out to an old friend from Mossad, someone who's been investigating the same financial network from a different angle. Someone who's been watching this place for the past week, waiting for the right moment to move. It wasn't entirely true, but the seed of doubt she saw in Webb's eyes told her the bluff was working. She had indeed contacted David Rosen from Israeli intelligence, but their cooperation had been limited to sharing information, not coordinating a joint operation. Still, Webb couldn't be certain, and uncertainty was a weapon she could use. "You're lying," Webb said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Maya reached slowly into her jacket, ignoring the weapons trained on her. "David gave me something interesting. Financial records showing payments from this monastery's shell company to a certain CIA director's offshore accounts. Payments that coincide remarkably well with arms deals and information leaks over the past 5 years. The documents she pulled out were actually routine surveillance photos, but in the dim light, they could be anything." Webb's face went pale as she held them up, and she knew she had struck gold. He was involved in the conspiracy, and more importantly, he was afraid of being exposed. "Kill her," Webb ordered, but his voice wavered. Maya had been counting on this moment of hesitation. In the split second when the operatives looked to their leader for confirmation, she moved with the fluid precision of years of combat training. Her first target was the closest operative, a young man whose finger had tightened on his trigger just a fraction too slowly. She grabbed his weapon, using his body as a shield as bullets from his colleagues sparked off the stone walls around them. The ancient monastery erupted into chaos as gunfire echoed through its sacred halls. Maya rolled behind a fallen column, her mind automatically calculating angles and cover points while her body moved on pure instinct. She had 6 rounds in the liberated weapon and 7 targets, including Webb. The math wasn't in her favor, but she had faced worse odds before. What happened next would determine not just her survival, but whether the conspiracy Webb was protecting would continue to flourish in the shadows of international intelligence. As bullets chipped away at her stone shelter and shouts echoed through the night air, Maya Chen prepared to do what she did best: turn the tables on those who had underestimated her. The firefight lasted exactly 47 seconds. Maya had counted each heartbeat, each muzzle flash, each ricochet off the ancient stone walls. When the echoes finally died away, 3 operatives lay motionless on the snow-covered ground, their blood creating dark patterns against the pristine white. Maya crouched behind the shattered remains of a medieval pillar, her liberated assault rifle now empty, her tactical vest torn by near misses that had come within millimeters of ending her life. Director Webb's voice carried across the courtyard, cold and calculating despite the chaos that had just unfolded. "Impressive as always, Maya, but you're outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and I promise your death will be quick." His words hung in the frigid air like a death sentence, but Maya detected something else in his tone: uncertainty. He hadn't expected her to survive the initial assault, and now he was improvising. Maya's earpiece suddenly crackled back to life, but instead of her handler's familiar voice, she heard something that made her blood freeze. It was her sister Emma's voice, strained with fear and confusion. "Maya! Maya, is that you? There are men here. They have guns. They say they're federal agents, but something doesn't feel right." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by Webb's cold laughter echoing through the monastery grounds. "Did you really think we wouldn't have contingencies in place?" Webb called out. "Your sister is currently enjoying the hospitality of my associates in a safe house outside Damascus. Cooperate, and she lives to continue her humanitarian work. Resist, and, well, those Syrian refugee camps can be very dangerous places." The revelation hit Maya like a sledgehammer to her chest. Emma wasn't just her sister. She was the only family Maya had left after their parents died in a car accident 7 years ago. More than that, Emma represented everything pure and good in Maya's world, a constant reminder of why she had chosen to dedicate her life to protecting innocence from the shadows. The thought of her gentle, compassionate sister in the hands of Webb's mercenaries filled Maya with a rage so pure it temporarily overwhelmed her training. But as her finger tightened on the empty rifle's trigger, Maya's professional instincts reasserted themselves. Webb was playing a psychological game, using her emotions against her. That meant Emma was valuable to him alive, at least for now. It also meant he was more desperate than he was letting on. Men who held all the cards didn't need to resort to threatening family members. "You made another mistake, Webb," Maya called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "You assumed Emma was defenseless. This wasn't entirely accurate. Emma was a nurse, not a spy, but Maya had insisted her sister take basic self-defense courses after a dangerous incident at a refugee camp 2 years ago. More importantly, Emma's work with Doctors Without Borders had connected her with a network of former military personnel who provided security for aid workers in conflict zones. If Webb's people had grabbed her, they might have bitten off more than they could chew. Maya's mind raced as she analyzed her situation. 4 operatives remained, plus Webb himself. Her position behind the pillar provided decent cover, but no escape routes. The monastery's main entrance was blocked, and the wall she had rappelled down was now crawling with reinforcements she could see through her peripheral vision. But there was something Webb didn't know about her infiltration route: the ancient catacombs beneath the monastery that she had discovered during her reconnaissance. Medieval monasteries often contained extensive underground burial chambers and storage areas, and this one was no exception. Maya had found an entrance hidden beneath a collapsed section of the north wall, but she hadn't explored it fully due to time constraints. Now, it might be her only chance for survival and the key to turning this disaster into victory. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the night air, their rotors cutting through the mountain wind like mechanical thunder. Maya cursed under her breath. Webb had called in serious reinforcements, but as the aircraft grew closer, she noticed something odd about their approach pattern. Instead of coming from the direction of the nearest military base, they were arriving from the east, from the direction of the Syrian border. Her earpiece crackled again, but this time the voice that emerged made her heart leap with hope. "Phoenix, this is Wolf. We have eyes on your position and are beginning our approach. Hold tight. The cavalry is coming." The voice belonged to David Rosen, her Mossad contact, and he sounded very much alive and very much in control of military aircraft. Webb apparently heard the transmission too because his composed demeanor finally cracked. "Impossible," he muttered loud enough for Maya to hear. "Intelligence said the Israelis weren't operating in this sector." Maya smiled grimly as the pieces of a much larger puzzle began falling into place. Her investigation into Kozlov hadn't been about arms dealing at all. It had been about something far more significant. The financial records she had discovered in Prague weren't just evidence of corruption. They were breadcrumbs leading to a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of multiple intelligence agencies. "You want to know what I really found in those Prague files, Webb?" she called out, keeping her voice conversational despite the guns trained on her position. "I found evidence that you and Kozlov weren't just business partners. You were running a joint CIA-Russian FSB operation, selling weapons to both sides of various conflicts while skimming profits into offshore accounts. But that wasn't the really interesting part." She paused, listening to the helicopters growing closer. Webb's remaining operatives were getting nervous, their weapons swinging between her position and the approaching aircraft. In the distance, she could see muzzle flashes as the monastery's perimeter guards engaged with what she assumed were David's ground forces. "The interesting part," Maya continued, "was discovering that this monastery isn't just a meeting place for arms dealers. It's a data processing center for an illegal surveillance network spanning 14 countries. You've been using Kozlov's criminal contacts to gather intelligence on foreign nationals, then selling that information to the highest bidders. Some of those buyers have been terrorist organizations." Webb's silence told her she had hit the mark. This wasn't just about corruption or arms dealing. It was about treason on an unprecedented scale. American intelligence assets were being used to facilitate terrorist attacks against allied nations, all in the name of profit. The first explosion came from the monastery's main gate, followed immediately by the distinctive sound of flashbang grenades detonating in sequence. David's team was conducting a full-scale assault, which meant they had official authorization for this operation. The Israeli government must have been tracking the same conspiracy from their end, probably following weapons that had been used against their citizens. In the chaos that followed, Maya made her move. While Webb's remaining operatives were distracted by the assault on their position, she sprinted across the courtyard toward the hidden entrance to the catacombs. Her boots slipped on the icy stone, and she nearly lost her balance as rifle fire erupted behind her, bullets sparking off the ground where she had been standing moments before. The entrance to the underground chambers was concealed beneath a fallen section of wall that looked like random debris but had actually been carefully arranged to hide a narrow passage. Maya squeezed through the opening just as an explosion rocked the monastery above her head, sending streams of dust and small stones raining down from the ancient ceiling. The catacombs were darker than the bottom of a well, and Maya's night vision goggles struggled to penetrate the oppressive blackness. The air was thick with the smell of centuries-old decay and something else, something chemical and modern that didn't belong in a medieval burial chamber. She followed the scent deeper into the labyrinthine passages, her weapon raised and ready, despite having no ammunition remaining. What she found in the depths of the monastery defied all her expectations. Hidden behind a false wall was a state-of-the-art server farm, its LED lights blinking like electronic eyes in the darkness. Dozens of high-end computers hummed quietly, processing vast amounts of data that streamed across monitors mounted throughout the chamber. This wasn't just a surveillance operation. It was the nerve center of a global intelligence network that made the CIA's capabilities look primitive by comparison. Maya approached one of the active terminals and began scrolling through the data, streams. What she saw made her stomach turn. Real-time surveillance feeds from major cities around the world, financial transactions tracking the movement of terrorist funding, communications intercepts from government officials in allied nations. Most disturbing of all, detailed profiles of intelligence operatives from friendly agencies, including photographs, family information, and psychological assessments. She recognized several faces from her own agency, people she had worked with and trusted. But there were others too. British MI6 agents, German BND operatives, French DGSE officers. Someone was building a comprehensive database of Western intelligence personnel, and Maya had a sinking feeling she knew who was buying this information. A soft footstep behind her made Maya spin around, her empty weapon raised defensively. But instead of Webb or his operatives, she found herself facing a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the kind of bearing that screamed military. Background: the woman's clothes were expensive but practical, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. "Agent Chen," the woman said in accented English that Maya immediately identified as Russian. "My name is Colonel Yelena Volkov, FSB. I believe we have much to discuss." Maya's mind reeled. FSB, Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Webb's mysterious partner wasn't Viktor Kozlov at all. It was this woman, a high-ranking Russian intelligence officer who had been using the arms dealer as a cover for something far more sinister. "Before you do anything rash," Volkov continued, raising her hands to show they were empty, "you should know that I didn't come here to fight you. I came to offer you the truth about what's really happening here, and perhaps a chance to save, not just your sister, but hundreds of other innocent people as well." The sound of gunfire above them was growing more intense, and Maya could hear voices shouting in multiple languages as David's assault team swept through the monastery. But down here in the electronic heart of the conspiracy, surrounded by servers full of stolen secrets, Maya found herself facing a choice that would determine the fate of her sister, her country, and, quite possibly, the balance of power in the intelligence community. Colonel Volkov smiled, an expression that contained no warmth but also no malice. "You see, Agent Chen, Director Webb has been lying to you about many things. But the biggest lie of all is that he's working for the American government. In truth, he's been working for me for the past 3 years, and this operation isn't about selling weapons or even gathering intelligence. It's about something much more ambitious: the complete restructuring of how the world's intelligence agencies operate." As explosions continued to rock the monastery above and the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the ancient stone corridors, Maya realized that everything she thought she knew about this mission had been wrong. The question now was whether Colonel Volkov was offering her salvation or simply a different kind of trap. Maya kept her empty weapon trained on Colonel Volkov while her mind processed this latest revelation. 3 years. Webb had been a Russian asset for 3 years, which meant every operation Maya had been involved in during that time had potentially been compromised. How many agents had died because of intelligence Webb had passed along? How many national security secrets had been sold to America's enemies? "You're lying," Maya said, though even as the words left her mouth she knew they weren't true. Too many pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Webb's insistence that she abandon the Prague investigation, his detailed knowledge of her movements and contacts, the way he had been waiting for her here at the monastery, as if he had known she would come. Volkov reached slowly into her jacket and withdrew a tablet computer. "I understand your skepticism, Agent Chen. In your position, I would feel the same way. She activated the device and turned the screen toward Maya. But I have proof. The tablet displayed a series of financial records showing regular payments, from a Russian government account to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Maya's breath caught as she recognized the account numbers. They matched the ones she had discovered in Prague. But more damning were the timestamps on the transactions. They corresponded exactly to dates when American intelligence operations had failed catastrophically. The bombing of the embassy in Ankara 2 years ago, Volkov said, scrolling through the records. 17 American personnel killed because the terrorists knew exactly when the security detail would change shifts. Webb provided that information. Maya's stomach churned as she remembered that operation. She had been part of the advanced security team, but had been reassigned at the last minute due to what Webb had called budget constraints. If she had been there that night, she would have died alongside her colleagues. The failed extraction of Agent Rodriguez from Tehran, Volkov continued. Webb told us the precise route your rescue team would take, allowing Iranian forces to set up the perfect ambush. The arms shipment to Syrian rebels that turned out to be a trap. Again, Webb's intelligence. Each revelation was like a physical blow. Maya had known and worked with some of the agents who had died in those operations. She had attended their funerals, comforted their families, never knowing that their deaths were the result of betrayal by someone they trusted. "Why are you telling me this?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why reveal your own asset?" Volkov's expression grew somber. "Because Director Webb has outlived his usefulness, and his actions have become excessive. The FSB did not authorize the capture of your sister. That was his initiative, driven by panic when he realized you were getting too close to the truth." The sound of footsteps grew closer, accompanied by voices speaking in Hebrew. David's team was systematically clearing the monastery level by level, and it wouldn't be long before they found the entrance to the catacombs. Maya needed to make a decision quickly, but the moral calculus was impossibly complex. "There's something else you need to understand," Volkov said, her voice taking on an urgent tone. "This operation isn't just about intelligence gathering or even arms dealing. Webb has been using the surveillance network to manipulate stock markets, currency exchanges, and commodity prices. He's been making himself rich while destabilizing the global economy." Maya's eyes widened as the implications sank in. If Webb had access to real-time intelligence from multiple countries, he could predict market movements with supernatural accuracy. Currency fluctuations, oil price changes, even natural disasters. All of these could be anticipated and exploited, if you had the right information. "The financial crisis in Argentina last month," Maya said, the pieces clicking together. "The sudden collapse of the euro against the dollar 3 weeks ago." "All orchestrated," Volkov confirmed. "Webb has been using classified intelligence to conduct what amounts to economic warfare against both our countries and others. The profits have been staggering. Over $2 billion in the past 18 months alone." A new sound reached them from above, the distinctive whine of helicopter rotors as aircraft landed in the monastery courtyard. But these weren't David's helicopters. The engine signature was wrong, and Maya's trained ear detected the heavier sound of military transport aircraft. Volkov must have heard it too, because her expression suddenly became urgent. "Webb has called in a private military contractor," she said. "Blackwater-style mercenaries who ask no questions and leave no witnesses. Your Mossad friends are about to walk into a massacre." Maya's earpiece crackled with David's voice, tense but controlled. "Phoenix, we have multiple aircraft inbound from the south. Armed mercenaries, at least 40 personnel. We need that intel. Package, and we need it now, or we're all going to be buried in this god-forsaken place." The moral equation suddenly became crystal clear. Whatever Colonel Volkov's ultimate motives might be, David and his team were Maya's allies, and they were about to die unless she acted quickly. The surveillance data in this underground chamber could be the key to exposing Webb's conspiracy and saving not just her sister, but potentially thousands of other innocent people. "What do you want?" Maya asked Volkov directly. "I want to download the complete database from these servers and transfer it to both Israeli and Russian intelligence simultaneously," Volkov replied. "This information will expose not just Webb's network, but similar operations being run by rogue elements in multiple intelligence agencies. It's bigger than just America and Russia. There are corrupted officials in Britain, Germany, France, even China who have been playing these same games." Maya stared at the blinking servers surrounding them. Terabytes of stolen data, surveillance records, financial information, and intelligence reports from dozens of countries. It was a treasure trove that could reshape the global intelligence landscape, but it could also be used as a weapon against the very people Maya had sworn to protect. "How do I know you won't use this information to harm American interests?" she asked. Volkov smiled grimly. "Because American interests are being harmed right now by Webb's network. Your own intelligence agencies have been compromised at the highest levels. This data will help you clean house, just as it will help us identify traitors in our own ranks." The sound of gunfire erupted above them, much closer than before. David's team had made contact with Webb's mercenaries, and from the intensity of the firefight, Maya could tell her friends were outnumbered and outgunned. She had perhaps minutes before the battle spilled down into the catacombs. "There's one condition," Maya said, making her decision. "We download the data simultaneously to 3 locations: Israeli intelligence, Russian intelligence, and a secure server controlled by NATO counterintelligence. That way, no single agency can suppress or manipulate the information." Volkov nodded approvingly. "You think like a professional, Agent Chen. I accept your terms." They moved quickly to one of the main server terminals. Volkov produced a military-grade encryption device while Maya accessed the monastery's communication systems. The data transfer would take approximately 12 minutes. 12 minutes during which they would be completely vulnerable to attack from either Webb's mercenaries or David's assault team. As the download began, Maya's earpiece crackled with her sister Emma's voice again, but this time the transmission was clearer. "Maya, I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to know I'm okay. The men who took me aren't who they claim to be. Some of them are speaking Russian, and I overheard them talking about a monastery in Romania. I managed to get access to a phone, and I've contacted the people I work with at Doctors Without Borders. Help is coming, but I need you to be careful. These people are planning something terrible." Maya's heart swelled with pride and relief. Emma had always been resourceful, and her work in dangerous regions had taught her skills that went far beyond medical training. If she had managed to contact her network of former military security personnel, Webb's people might find themselves dealing with more than they had bargained for. "Your sister is remarkable," Volkov observed, having heard the transmission. "Perhaps she is more like you than you realize." The data transfer reached 30% completion when the lights in the chamber suddenly went out, plunging them into absolute darkness. Emergency power kicked in moments later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow that made the blinking servers look like electronic demons. The monastery's main power grid had been cut, probably by Webb's mercenaries as they attempted to secure the facility. "How much longer?" Maya asked, checking her watch. 8 minutes, Volkov replied, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she attempted to maintain the connection despite the power fluctuations. The sound of explosions grew closer, and Maya could hear voices shouting in English with American accents. Webb's mercenaries were using breaching charges to blast their way through the monastery's ancient doors and walls. It wouldn't be long before they found the entrance to the catacombs. Maya's earpiece crackled with David's voice, strained and urgent. "Phoenix, we're being pushed back toward the north wall. Whatever you're doing down there, you need to finish. Hit fast. We can't hold our position much longer." "Copy that, Wolf," Maya replied. 5 more minutes, then we'll have everything we need to burn this whole network to the ground." But, as she spoke, she heard the distinctive sound of footsteps echoing through the stone corridors leading to their chamber. Heavy boots, moving in formation, accompanied by the soft whisper of tactical equipment. Webb's mercenaries had found the entrance to the catacombs, and they were coming. Maya and Volkov exchanged glances in the red emergency lighting. The Russian colonel drew a pistol from her jacket, a sleek Makarov that gleamed dully in the crimson glow. Maya checked her own weapon, still empty but perhaps useful as a blunt instrument if it came to that. "Agent Chen," Volkov said quietly, "I want you to know that regardless of what happens in the next few minutes, working with you has been an honor. You represent the best of what intelligence work can be. Loyalty to ideals rather than to institutions." The footsteps were getting closer, and Maya could see flashlight beams beginning to probe the outer chambers of the catacomb system. In 4 minutes, they would have all the data they needed to expose the conspiracy and save countless lives. In 4 minutes, they might also both be dead. The data transfer hit 75%, just as the first flashlight beam swept across the entrance to their chamber. Maya gripped her empty weapon and prepared to make her final stand in the electronic heart of the conspiracy that had cost so many lives. But as the beam of light grew brighter and the sound of approaching footsteps filled the ancient stone chamber, she realized that sometimes the only way to turn the tables completely was to risk everything on a single, desperate gamble. Maya's desperate gamble began with a whispered conversation in the red emergency lighting as Webb's mercenaries approached. Their position. "Colonel, can you access the monastery's internal systems from here?" she asked Volkov, who was maintaining the data download with one hand while gripping her Makarov with the other. "Yes, but why?" Volkov began. Then her eyes widened as she understood Maya's plan. "You want to turn their own surveillance system against them." "Exactly. If this place is monitoring everything, then it's also recording everything, including Webb's confession about my sister, his admission of treason, and evidence of the economic manipulation." Maya's fingers flew across a secondary terminal, accessing the monastery's security feeds. "We're not just going to expose the conspiracy. We're going to broadcast it live to every intelligence agency in the world." The footsteps were close enough now that Maya could hear tactical radio chatter echoing through the stone corridors. Webb's voice cut through the static, cold and commanding. "Sweep every chamber. Kill the Russian woman, but I want Chen alive. We need to know exactly what she's discovered and who else she might have told." Maya's blood ran cold. Webb still thought he could control this situation, still believed he could eliminate witnesses and cover his tracks. He had no idea that in 90 seconds, when the data transfer completed, his entire network would be exposed to allied intelligence agencies simultaneously. The download progress bar showed 87% when the first mercenary rounded the corner into their chamber. Maya was ready for him. She had positioned herself behind one of the server racks, using the electronic equipment as both cover and concealment. As the soldier's flashlight beam swept past her position, she struck with the efficiency of 12 years of combat training. Her empty assault rifle became a club, its stock connecting with the mercenary's temple with a sickening crack that echoed through the stone chamber. The man dropped without a sound, his own weapon clattering across the ancient floor. Maya immediately grabbed his rifle and ammunition, her movements fluid and practiced despite the desperate circumstances. 91%, Volkov reported, her voice steady despite the gun battle that was about to erupt around them. 2 more minutes. The next wave of mercenaries came prepared for resistance. 3 men entered the chamber in formation, their movements coordinated and professional. But Maya had advantages they didn't expect. Intimate knowledge of the chamber's layout from studying the surveillance feeds, and the electronic chaos of the server farm that interfered with their night vision equipment. She used the maze of cables and equipment racks like an urban warfare environment, appearing from behind cover to take precisely aimed shots before disappearing again into the electronic labyrinth. Her targets weren't trying to kill her. Webb's orders had been clear about taking her alive, but Maya had no such restrictions.